Welcome back. Well, desperate Aussies are doing whatever they can to try and escape the war zone. The federal government's scrambling to organise repatriation flights out of Israel as it comes under fire for its response to the crisis. Joining us to discuss today's headlines is Deputy Opposition Leader Susan Lee and Independent MP Sophie from Avalon in New South Wales. Thank you both for your time. Susan, I'll start with you. Peter Dutton has been quite vocal in his criticism about the government's response to this crisis, but is there a risk he's turning this into a bit of a political fight that we should be engaging in now?
Not at all, Sarah, and it's not a political fight. For example, I call out Josh Burns in Macnamara in Melbourne, who's probably had more to say in support of our Jewish community than some of our ministers, and he's a member of the Labor Party. This is about us holding the government to account. They were not sufficiently strong or responsive in those early days. It took Prime Minister Albanese 16 hours to even issue a statement. And now we have concerns. All Australians should have concerns for the safety of the Jewish community. I stood with them at a vigil in the eastern suburbs last night, and it was good to see the Premier there. It was good to see a representative from the Cabinet there, but I think we need to really wrap our arms around our Jewish community in a stronger way, listen to their concerns for their safety. And while the government has responded, it has been too slow. And I'm worried about Australians at home as well as Australians abroad. Yeah,
it was great. You were at that vigil yesterday. Obviously, the Prime Minister was meeting with community leaders in Melbourne, the Jewish community there as well. I mean, I guess, Sophie, the question is about how much the government can do in this instance. They've organised those free evacuation flights from Israel. We know that Australian citizens are desperate to get out of the war zone. Is it enough?
Oh, look, absolutely. The Australian government's first priority has to be looking after Australian citizens and getting them out of that situation as quickly as possible and looking after people here in Australia. And I've got to say that I do think the Australian government came out pretty unambiguously and unequivocally to condemn what happened in Israel as well. It is deeply shocking, and I think it's a time for Australians, politicians from across the spectrum, to come together and stand together to denounce this rather than this political point scoring and you know, using it for cheap political spot.
Yeah, we've seen some absolutely horrific scenes in the community. I guess, Susan, now the focus is to ensure the safety of the Jewish community.
It is, and listening to the Jewish community, they are concerned for their safety, and you've just highlighted that on a previous segment on the program, Sarah. So we are calling on the government to do more, and we won't take a backward step in holding them to account. No way in the world will we take a backward step. This is, I mean, there are always domestic implications for international acts of war and aggression overseas. It took the Prime Minister quite some time, it seems, to even convene a special committee of Cabinet to examine that. So we are holding them to account.
All right, let's move on now and to some happier news. A huge relief overnight with Aussie journalist Chen Lei back on home soil after spending more than 3 years detained in China, where she was accused of illegally supplying state secrets. Not much transparency there. Susan, Chen Lei home is an incredible result, and really it's a win for the government.
Well done to the government, and so lovely to see Chen Lei come home. We still remember that letter from her cell, only seeing a small amount of sunlight, and she called it a love letter to 25 million Australians. And for those of us like me who've come from overseas, we just feel such warmth for our country and everything that is so special about it. So great work by our diplomats, working so carefully behind the scenes as well. They're not always acknowledged publicly, but the work they do is extraordinary. It's also worth noting, Sarah, that we have others that are detained. Chen Lei should never have been detained. Yang Hangjun is still there, and others are being illegally detained. So the Chinese Communist Party should repeat what they've been able to do with this Australian, with others.
Yeah, so it's always a bit of a delicate dance, isn't it, when we've got an Australian detained in a foreign country, particularly in China in this instance. There's not much transparency. It's a bit murky. I guess the question is now why she was there for so long.
Well, exactly. I met her partner, Nick Coyle, earlier on in the year just by chance, and it was such a deeply distressing time for that family and for Cheng to be separated from her children for 3 years. I do think we have to celebrate the amazing Australian diplomacy that obviously occurred behind the scenes. And let's just take this as a big win, and obviously there's more work to do with other Australians